Hey there, pilot, and thank you for tuning in. We're doing a bit of a reaction video to the latest ISC on the future of space combat. I don't typically do these videos, but there are a couple of points I thought would be interesting to talk about, considering that I'm pretty passionate when it comes to the handling specifically of spaceships. And while this video is, well, kind of particular in terms of isolating to the future of combat, what we see a lot is that the general experience of flight and as well racing, for example, go hand in hand with combat. And a lot of things that you would look at for space combat, you would look at for racing or any other kind of joyful experiencing with the flight models. So let's talk about a couple of things. What strikes me as really cool about this video is how they first introduced themselves in terms of who is part of the team that helps to make these decisions, and kind of putting in perspective the fact that this is a team of people that are very ambitious and actively play the game as well, so they know what's up.
It is a cross-disciplinary team from multiple teams at CIG. It includes members from vehicle experience team, vehicle feature team, player experience team, and also several other departments. The main thing about these people is that they're invested in space combat and they're actively playing the game.
It's not just a couple of lead designers sitting in an office somewhere making these changes, but rather instead it is the actual people that enjoy playing the game. And then they explain a little bit about how they are the right people to make these decisions. And then beyond explaining who they are, they also talk about what they've done to make sure that they are making the right decisions. I've said in the past that I feel like combat in Star Citizen really feels like you are flying a simulator game, a combat simulator. And when you're going up against a pilot, or whether it's a player or an NPC, it feels more simulator-like, and it's like a very balanced sort of combat where it's more about your capabilities compared to your enemy or your opponent. And then to hear them explain that they've actually gone to the lengths of doing these real combat exercises and speaking to the people with the experience and knowledge on the subject of combat is incredible. And it just further proves the fact that they've got the right goal in mind and they really want to take this in the right way, which is very exciting to me.
We even went so far to have actual dogfighting lessons in flight simulators with former members of the Royal Air Force.
So we brought this all together through a series of combat summits, and this involved bringing people from different areas of the company together. So we went away from our kind of day-to-day stuff and we got together and talked about all these past releases, these theories we had about combat and how they kind of, translate to the Star Citizen experience we were aiming for. And we tried to create a plan, for the next 12 months.
A very small note they made is that they're all about giving the player options, whatever that option might be. And that resonates with me really well, because I often find myself having an opinion that might be different than someone else. While my opinion might actually not be the better one, it's just a preference, and someone else might have a different preference. So options are always nice. If you have just a switch or something in your key bindings or in the main menu that you can swap, that both people can have it the way they like it, is perfect. So giving the player options is really nice. Of course, they mentioned they want to avoid meta gameplay, which is awesome. I find myself so often liking ships that aren't particularly the meta ship that other people like, and you often get told that if you are enjoying that plane, then you're doing it wrong, or that ship, I should say. And I just like the idea, and this comes back with the shield gameplay as well that they mentioned later on. I like the idea that you can use the ship that you like and put in the components that you like and still be competitive, simply because there isn't a meta. It's just you're either better at this thing or better at that thing, and you might tip the scale a little bit in either direction. I really like that, and hopefully that we'll see more ships being useful in the future for whatever gameplay you have in mind.
Giving the player options and also giving the players the data to act on. So we give the player the information of the systems that we're building so they can make the choices.
The second part is giving every weapon and every vehicle and every other item a proper purpose in the game.
And then we embrace those limitations that those choices make. So the players have to make choices. So it isn't just a case of picking the best of everything. There's certain limitations that come with picking certain things. Then basically it's got to feel believable.
I joined Star Citizen in 3.13. I didn't get a lot of chance before we moved to 3.14, but there were definitely a couple of things that changed that I didn't like per se. And this video was very reassuring, again, in terms of what we can expect in the future. So talking about some of these things, in 3.13, we saw strafe up or vertical up being a lot weaker than it is in 3.14. And they actually touch on this. It's hilarious because not yesterday, I made a video or a forum post rather on Spectrum talking about these changes. And I definitely received a wide variety of responses in terms of how passionate people are and where their opinions might sit. I think it was really cool to hear Yogi Klat then speak about exactly this topic not a day later. It's really cool. Surely a coincidence, but I just love it. It really shows that they are in tune with what the community might be looking at as well, and that is awesome.
So flight tuning, right? By far the least important aspect of combat tuning. Just joking. No, we're not happy with the current flight tuning. What we did in 3.14 and 15 was pushing the ships into an archetype space, but that also meant that a lot of the differences between the ships were lost. And we also had to trick some numbers here and there. For example, ships can now strafe up way faster than they can strafe down. That is down to some magic numbers we added, but we actually want to reduce these magic numbers and do it properly with the thruster tuning. This will be, however, a longer ongoing process.
I love that. They have so much plans for thruster tuning in mind still that will see a whole different set of thruster strengths than that we see right now, I believe, and that is awesome. For example, I mentioned I think strafe up is a bit too strong, but it is a necessary evil to make a ship as nimble and agile as you want. You don't want to have this jousting, drifty thing, whether it's combat or racing. So it is nice to have more vert up or strafe up, but then it doesn't make much sense that the retro thrusters, the brakes, are weaker than the verts up, even though on a lot of ships these thrusters are actually much bigger in size. So it's just great to see that they still have so much in store for us, and again, what we're looking at now is just sort of a placeholder. So just super excited about that. Something else that is really cool that they mentioned they want to work on. I only had a little bit of time in 3.15, but the instant I was flying around, I realized that G-forces have more of an impact on the blackout. You G-lock earlier, lock being loss of conscious, so you black out. I think this is nice. I thought it was a little OP in 3.13 or in 3.14 where you could really pull a lot of G. So it's nice to see them bring it back, even though that does obviously reduce the amount of fun one can have. But I think it's a promising prospect, the fact that they're looking at it.
In the past, we had a lot of G-forces, and during dogfighting, G-force was a very important part of how you handle your ship. That impact was lost over time, and we're currently working on bringing that back, which means lowering the G-force thresholds to force players to do certain maneuvers to recover from the exhaustion effects.
You know, our goal with this is that you'll need to be really careful with, not only how you manage the energy on your ship, but how you manage your ability to sustain Gs over the long term.
I mentioned the shields already. I love that they mentioned that you will see different kinds of shields, but the primary driver for how good you'll do is still your capabilities as opposed to your opponent. So I think that's really cool. You'll be able to kind of specialize your shield in different ways without it being like, okay, if you don't have this shield, you're gonna suck. So that's really cool. The power triangle is really cool. I like how it works in Star Citizen, and one thing that I find myself doing a lot is just using the max settings. Either I'm going full pips or full PT to power to weapons, or full PT to engines based on what I need, and I'm just constantly adapting it. But when you had full power to weapons, for example, your shields do not regenerate, your boost does not regenerate. So it felt a little harsh. And now they mentioned they want to have a minimum regen, even when things have 0 PT assigned, which is cool. So you'll always kind of see a little bit of regen to your components that you're not prioritizing at the moment, which is great and something that I really like.
An important thing we added in 3.15 are minimum regen for all power triangle assignments. So even if you have your full assignment, let's say put to engines, you get still a little bit of regen in your weapon capacitors and on your shields.
I love that they mentioned that they're not happy with the current flight tuning. I love the way Yogi Klut is approaching the topic with his sarcastic joke. I think it's awesome. And again, I think it just kind of proves the plans they have for the future. Osashis made a really important point, which I think is fair. He hopes that they don't underdo it in the sense that things become too sluggish and less fun. Thrusters are really strong right now, but also it is needed to kind of make things feel fun. For example, how a Razor is able to drift around the snake pit, or an M50 is able to not drift too wide in 0G. I just love the fact that he mentioned the magic numbers they've assigned, the cheating they did to the strafe up. I mentioned this already, and it's just something I noticed. You know, we look at all these Gforce thruster strengths in each 6 degrees of freedom and kind of determine which ships are good at what, and it's nice to see that they are so consciously working on this system, and it just gives me a lot of faith in what they're doing. They want to do it the right way, and that's just great. We have the thrust vector indicator. Is it the TVI or the true vector indicator? I always get it wrong. It is now permanently visible, which is awesome. We've been asking for that for a while, and it pleases me that it is. Now, if it is close to your crosshair, you can still see exactly where you're going. This is super important for decoupled flight. And on that topic, we'll talk about the IFCS trimming. But not before I mention that Yogi Klut said, rightfully so, that they want to keep things, they want it close to realism, but it's got to be fun. So you go to real, then you squish it down to where it's fun, and I love that. And I hope that means that, you know, we do see us as pilots being able to pull more Gs than a real person could. I hope that means that we see ships being stronger than the real life equivalents would be, because we don't have the tech, for example. But in mind, having that balance between retros and strafing and verts and G-locking and that sort of stuff to make it real but fun. Just super excited. So the IFCS trimming is interesting. I'm not convinced it'll be as useful as they're hoping, but nonetheless, it's options and it'll help us do more things. So to recap what they said, you can, for example, if you're on a planet, hold vert up, strafe up until the point where you are hovering, and then you can set your trim so that if you take your controls, your hands off the controls, you will maintain that hover. Or you can set your left stick to 50% thrust. You can press your trim button and it'll hold it. It's great to have it as options, though I'm not sure it'll be that useful. I find myself, for example, if I want to stop, I just press coupled mode and take my hands off the stick. If I want cruise control, I'll press coupled mode and throw the cruise control on, which puts me at max speed, you know? So there are already options there, and maybe the IFCS trimming will mean I will use that system more. What's interesting is if you're using Virpils, you can already do this with the Virpil software. There is trimming in the software. You press a button, and based on where your hands are on your sticks, it'll make that the new center point. So you can already do it if you are interested. Last mention is high-speed combat. They mentioned it doesn't really work very well. And I have noticed this, of course, especially when you're decoupled, you end up kind of floating.
The problem of high speed. We know that high-speed combat doesn't work well. And we also know that low-speed combat between 200 and 300 meters per second is incredibly enjoyable. How are we going to resolve that? We don't know yet. We'll see.
What I always say is speed is relative to your opponent, and that is the only thing that should matter. It doesn't matter if I am going 200 meters per second or 800 meters per second. If we're both floating in the same direction, the only importance is the relative speed. And they have a real technical challenge here, of course, because how the hell do you overcome that? Because obviously to the server, you're moving at 800 meters per second. You've got the latency, you've got the data behind it, you know, in memory on how to translate your coordinates to the player on the other side of the battle. And it is really difficult, you know, even though your relative speeds might not change between floating, strafing 200 meters in a direction or 900 or 800. For the server, it is a big difference. And I can only imagine some way to fix this or make it better is to have a sort of floating center point. So if two people are engaged around a battle, don't make local space the way the coordinates are calculated, but instead put them in a bubble that has an average center point, and the average center point follows on this extrapolated path their trajectory, and sort of make it that the relative speeds don't change, but the speed in reference to the local space is no longer stationary but a floating moving point. Give them their own moving bubble with a center point that is always in motion. Very complicated, and I definitely don't think I have the right answer, but just trying to think along. I want to invite Yogi Clot. This dude is so cool. And he mentions he wants to lurk with different communities. And I think over at XGR, we're talking so much about different spaceships and their strengths in Atmo versus 0G and things like that. And I would invite Yogi Klutz to come and lurk as much as he likes and see if he can win in some valuable inputs there.
Sometimes we're going to stay undercover, sometimes not. Also, I would like to say that while we might not reply to every Spectrum thread we see, we read everything. So please always give us your feedback, give us your opinions, because in the end, it will help us to make a better game. So thank you for your continued cooperation and support for us, and enjoy IAE next week.
So anyway, we've been chatting for a while now. I hope this was interesting to you. I don't really do the cover the news videos, and I don't plan to do that often, but this is a topic that I'm super passionate about and have been covering before in my videos, talking about VTOL strengths and things like that, and how right now you don't need VTOLs because strafe up is so strong. And yeah, I figured people did actually ask if I was going to cover this, so I figured I would, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I will see you hopefully Sunday, where we'll be doing the Dragonfly racing, so come and join us, either race or watch us on Twitch. We'll be streaming the event, and you are more than welcome to join us, whatever you decide to do. See you in the next one.